What was the biggest plot twist that's happened in your life? I don't know if this is a plot twist, but I find it funny. My boyfriend used to have a shitty rundown Mustang and would joke with his friends that he liked his women like he liked his cars, can't run. After dating for a year and a half we got in a car crash that left me paralyzed from the waist down. Edit. This funny guys. Don't feel bad for laughing. Double edit. Yes, we are still together. The crash was not in the Mustang, but in a Ford Ranger. Boyfriend was not injured in said accident. The sex is good. Joined the army to help people. Ended up having to turn my squad in for the rape and murder of an Iraqi family. #WASNOTEXPECTINGTHAT. I struggled with my sexuality a lot. It took me years to admit that I was gay. 10 years after coming out of the closet, I fell for a girl, and it caught me completely off guard. Wife was pregnant with our third and last planned child. We ended up in the era she was miscarrying. The nurse cried because the fetus was not viable, so there was nothing to be done. It was horrible. One of the first times I felt completely helpless as an adult. Welp. Turns out the miscarry was actually her body making room for twins. The girls are 5 now. Went from losing 1 to gaining 2. Edit. I apologize for poor phrasing. I typed it late on mobile. Let me clear up some things. The couple previous ultrasounds only showed single baby. There was only a single heartbeat. The miscarry symptoms: horrible cramping, pressure, blood loss. Was her body preparing for twins? We did not lose a baby. We were told we were losing it by doctors and had accepted that. In the end we gained 2. But not without another scare. The position of fetus B was in a dangerous location. That would make overall development and C-section very dangerous. We were told for the second time that we'd more than likely lose a baby. My wife was put on bed rest and went on to carry the twins to full term. The unlikely twin is named Grace. P.S. Thanks for gold. Entered seminary planning to be a rabbi. 5 years later I'm an atheist, a teacher, and dating a Catholic. Whoops. When I was around 8 I was diagnosed with muscular dystrophy and some severe heart issues. Everyone kinda just assumed I would die any day after that. Welcome 8 years later I was still here, and my doctors pretty much gave up on figuring out what is wrong with me. So my parents decided to get a second opinion. We went to Mayo Clinic, and I was easily diagnosed with postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. Something that is easily treated through exercise. In my case, POTS varies a lot and can be much more difficult to fight for others. The opposite of what my doctors told me to do. After that I was just like, shit, now I have to plan my future. Told this before and will again. I was a little goth girl in HS and secretly had a mad crush on an upperclassman that was a wrestler and did cross country. My cousin, who was Miss Socialite, also had a crush on him and hit on him constantly. He and I were complete opposites. We rode the same bus and I was pretty sure I was invisible to him. So one day his friends start picking on me. He gets up from the front of the bus, moves to where his bud is and I are, sits down next to me, throws his arm around me, and they stop. This pisses off my cousin as he and I become friends and he constantly ignores her advances. She later on goes on to have me expelled by saying I had a bomb and was going to blow up the school because she didn't like this or that her BF and I were close friends. This ruined every friendship I had, except the one with my/her crush. He and I remained friends even after he moved away, and then closer friends when he moved back. Today he and I are going on 4 years together. We bought a house and car, had a daughter, and are working on plans to build our next and probably permanent home. 10 years later the bitch is still greener than a Granny Smith apple. I was transferred to a division. Within a few months my new supervisor and I hated each other. She was incompetent, and I spoke up when she screwed up. She made my life hell and finally decided to give me a job that she thought would make me quit. I packed up my stuff in a box and asked for help moving to my new desk. She said she didn't have anyone to spare. I was carrying my box and didn't see a spill on the floor. Ironically, just outside her office. I slipped, fell, and broke my knee. I'm on permanent disability, very legitimately. received a huge settlement, lifetime healthcare, retired early. She was demoted, then fired, partially due to the way she handled my case. This all happened a few years ago. Recently, when my husband and I were grocery shopping, I saw her in the store. I didn't want to see her, but my husband caught her eye and gave her a big thumbs up. She looked pissed. Bill was a self-made millionaire by the time he was 18 years old. That was in the mid-80s. He has been one of my best and certainly most influential friends. 25 years ago he married a girl that I did not like or trust. I told him as much, but he married her weird ass anyways. A few years ago she ran off with a guy she met at a roller skating rink. He apparently wooed her with his zooming around or whatever, and Bill was single again. He met a girl and insisted I meet her. Bill remembered that I had not approved of his ex. We met for lunch at one of those awful buffets. This girl was beautiful. She used English like a scalpel. Working on PhD. She was awesome. But I noticed little things about her. She had obviously been to finishing school. Then why did she have fingernail polish on her cuticles and a dress from a 1985 resale rack? There was just a lot of details that didn't add up, and Bill was getting ready to marry her. I told Bill that I thought she was hiding something, but I didn't care. This gal was high class and high-bred. I told him she was great. Bill hadn't met her parents till the wedding. It was at their beach house in Destin. It turns out that my friend hadn't told his new bride of his formidable wealth. But she had been hiding the fact that her parents are legit billionaires. Bill deserves someone like her. For 17 years I thought I had 2 birthmarks on my torso. That is until my then GF was curious about them and took a very close look at them. Turns out I have an extra set of nipples. Tiny but fully formed with a realus and all. My uncle is actually my father. I'm not referring to my mother's brother. Backstory: my mom slept with 2 brothers at separate times. In the 70s they could only give a blood test for paternity. I didn't find out until I was 14, when we all took a DNA test who my actual father was. I injected heroin for years, but never shared needles. After I had quit, a woman I was with took a stepanel and gave me the worst news: that she had Hep B. My heart was broken for her and myself. For 2 months I was sure this was the case, and that I'd be dealing with us for the foreseeable future. It then turned out that while she was a brilliant person, with English as her third language, she didn't realize that negative meant she was in the clear. When she told me, I almost had a breakdown. My mom and I haven't really had any relationship for the past 5 years for a lot of reasons. A couple of huge parts of that being my having left the religion that I was raised in, and her having severe bipolar disorder that made her nearly impossible to deal with, which she refused to maintain treatment for. We have only spoken once in the last 5 years, and it was awful. It was about a year and a half ago. I drove down to CA to visit her, 450 miles from me, and tried to patch things up. It ended up in a huge blowout fight, and generally went as poorly as it possibly could. We never spoke again. One morning in May of this year, my dad showed up at my door randomly. He and my mom had been divorced for many years, and said we needed to talk. The apartment building my mom was living in had been set on fire and she didn't make it out. I still can't believe how hard it hit me. It changed me. Maybe forever. The worst part was about 3 weeks ago, when I was trying to remember the password to an old PayPal account. I had to have it reset, and it was sent to an old email address that I haven't used in years. When I logged in, I found an email from her, sent just shortly before she died, apologizing and trying to reconnect and make amends. We had been out of contact for so long, it was the last email address she had for me. But since I hadn't been using it for years, I didn't get her message until months after her death. I was pursuing this woman that I worked with, and she was playing along and flirting back with me. She would often just gaze at me and hold eye contact with me in a very seductive way. I was totally hooked on her until this one day. She confessed to me that she was married to a woman, had 2 cats, adopted them at different times, and they were the same age or close to. They both got sick and had to be taken to the vet. He took blood tests on both of them, said he noticed similarities, and then ran them against each other. I don't understand what exactly he did, but it revealed that they were related. Yep, like brother sister. They were adopted years apart. One as a kitten, and one at 2 years old. Barely look alike either. Honestly couldn't believe it. Parents split when I was little. Came out to my mum and stepdad when I was 13. Phoned my dad up when I was 16 because it was time I had to let him know. Dad, I've got something to tell you. Whatever it is, I love you. I'm gay. So am I. What? I met a girl through POF and dated her for a year. She lived 6 minutes up the street from me, so we saw each other quite often. Both of us were quite introverted, so we mainly only hung out with each other. We both considered the relationship to be serious and exclusive. Anyway, right from the start of the relationship, I noticed that she would text this one guy pretty frequently. I asked her about him, and she told me that he was her tattoo artist. Just to be snoopy, I checked out the website of the place she gets her tattoos done. Sure enough, there was a tattoo artist there with the same first name as the guy in her phone, but the last name was different. I asked her about it, and she quickly called me out on being paranoid, and how it was ridiculous to think that she would lie to me. I agreed. It was pretty paranoid of me. Maybe 5 months later into the relationship, I'm on Facebook, and I decide to search the name of the guy in her phone. A profile comes up in the same small city we both live in, but there is no profile picture or anything. I decide to bring it up with her again, because now there is 2 Facebook profiles, one who is actually a tattoo artist, and one who has the same name that is in her phone. She freaks out on me for bringing it up again, and tells me that I'm crazy. I agreed, but just wanted a straight answer. She told me that I had nothing to be worried about. I apologized, and we got over it. About a year into the relationship, I found her on POF. I would periodically go on there to see if she recreated her profile. We both deleted our profiles. I found a profile that I thought might be hers, but obviously no pictures. I catfished it, and it turned out to be her. She was back on POF and looking for guys. I had all the evidence I needed, and I was going to confront her with it the next day and break up with her. However, I thought that if I was going to break up with her, I was going to message this Facebook profile I had found that matched the name in her phone, just out of curiosity. Plot twist, I message the guy. He gets back to me immediately. We converse, and it turns out that he is her boyfriend. I had been her second boyfriend the entire time. She met him 2 months before she met me. She bounced back between me and him for an entire year. Neither me or him knew about each other. He saw my name in her phone once, and she said that I was her tattoo artist. Every time I ever called her out, I was right. Every time she was gone mysteriously at night, she was with him. Every time she said she was hanging out with a friend of hers, she was with him. She doesn't actually have any friends. It was always him. Anyway, we both broke up with her the next morning and met the next day to have a beer. Haven't spoken with him since. This is kind of mine, and kind of my mom's. When I was a kid, I moved to a different state, and eventually made friends with a girl at my new school. We eventually ended up having a sleepover at my place one night. In the morning, her mom came over to pick her up and get to know my mom and me. When our moms got to talking, they discovered that not only were they from the same state that nobody involved had lived in for at least 10 years, but that they had played together as kids at the same church. I will try to keep this as short as possible. My grandfather left my grandmother for another man after 35 years of marriage and the raising of 2 kids. A daughter, mom, and a slightly mentally disabled son, drunkle. It messed my grandmother up pretty bad. Fast forward 16 years. My mom dies from liver failure. Me and my kid sister are young and broke. Grandmother is old and broke. Grandfather pays for everything. Nobody says anything to him. No thanks. No condolences. Nothing. I want to go see him and talk to him. Thank him. And see how he's doing. I ask my grandmother where he lives. On the grounds that he told me he had something important he needed to tell me. Pulled out of my ass. Obviously. But grandmother bursts into tears and confesses that grandfather is not my mom's real father. She had a whirlwind romance with some traveling jackass conman who left her as soon as he could. Grandfather offered to marry grandmother and raise my mom as his own. Mom never knew. I was stunned. My grandmother was always really judgmental of other people and looked down on anyone else in this exact situation. She was sobbing at this point, and I snapped at her to stop because blood never really played all that heavily into what me and my sister considered family, and that she shouldn't consider it either. Anyway, that's how I found out one of my family's biggest secrets on accident, and then promptly didn't give a shit. Neat plot twist, though. Edit. Clarity on crazy pants familial terms.